Thank you so much for joining us tonight. The Pacific Division Feeding Capacity Building Series is brought to you by the Division Feeding Leadership. My name is Yi Wei. I've been a volunteer with the Red Cross for 16 years. I am a Mass Care Chief and the Pacific Feeding Co-Lead with Mary. Several housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted tonight on our Pacific Division Red Cross YouTube channel. The link was included in the reminder email that was sent out earlier. Your camera and mic have been disabled. We will not be using the chat functions. You have two options to get your questions answered. You can either enter your questions in the Q&A or raise your hand and we'll address your questions at the end when time allows. Please also remember to enter your own hours on volunteer connections. Christine and Vicky tonight will share with us the feeding agreement process. And Vicky and Christine, please take it away.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Check. Thank you. I always get paranoid. I'm talking to myself. All right. Hello, everybody. It's great to see you all here. My name is Vicky Balmas. I'm the Regional Mass Care Manager for the Central California region. And I'm here with Christine Rosso, who is one of our volunteers. Christine, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. My name is Christine Rosso. I help with food support down here in Ventura County out of our Camarillo office.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking tonight about food vendor surveys, kind of the blue sky and the gray sky aspects of working with our feeding vendors and kind of making arrangements with them, seeing what their capabilities are. So Christine is going to be talking specifically about the blue sky aspect of this. And then I will jump in at the end and talk a little bit about the gray sky, the actual setting up and activating feeding supplier agreements. That's what we will do. Blue sky first, which is, I think, really the most important part of this, is these relationships that we make, of course, and during the blue sky. So I'm going to turn it over to Christine. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Vicki. I think gray sky is just as important. But anyways, I do have a heart for our blue sky activities, what we've been doing down here with our food vendor surveys. It's just a lovely way to reach out to our community partners. As I shared, I am a food support volunteer down here in Ventura County. I joined about 9 years ago as an EBV, an event-based volunteer during the Thomas Fire. I worked several roles, but I always find my way to the dining area and the kitchen area, and that is where my heart always lies. Food is definitely my love language, so I love partnering and finding potential partners out in our community. My husband and I also owned our own business, a very small business, for about 40 years, so I understand that relationship, how much we loved our community, our employees, so that is also very important to me as well. So when I think about vendor surveys, it was easy for my mind. I thought, oh my goodness, where do I start? We have a large community out here, a lot of restaurants, a lot of food trucks, a lot of options. And so for me, it just helped to kind of bring it down to the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. It helped break it down for me into smaller pieces, and then it really became enjoyable for me. Next slide, please. So this is the survey. I have usually a file of blanks in my car in case I'm out lunching or somebody starts talking to me about their what they love to do, what kind of food they love to serve if I'm out and about at a restaurant, and I can go briefly through it. It's very simple and friendly. It's a mass care document, and so we just talk. We get our vendor's name. We want their address. A name and a title is great if we can make that connection with that one person at that restaurant. Sometimes we may find ourselves in a disaster, and all of a sudden we're getting texts from that one person. We can really create lovely relationships with them. So that is always very important. We always want to talk about the number and types of meals that they can provide. Some are breakfast only, breakfast, lunch, dinner, where they really shine and what they love to do. And prior notice, maybe they're not going to be a vendor that can serve on that first night that a shelter opens, but if they have a week, then they can provide different meals. So that is really important because we want them to feel comfortable and not under pressure. Um, we also have prices per meal, and this is just, I always reassure our partners that this is just kind of an idea, a guideline, right? We always know that those things can change if there's an egg shortage or a problem getting, lettuces. So I always reassure them. I don't want them to feel locked in at this point when we're just kind of introducing ourselves to our partners. We also want to talk to them about what kind of special diets they might be able to provide if they feel comfortable, vegetarian meals, any holiday meals. That is very, very helpful to us to know that. Do they pick up? Do they drop off? Do they do both? And then also, what is their preferred method of payment? Sometimes smaller businesses can't wait a longer period of time. They need that immediate payment so that they can, in turn, pay their suppliers. So we always want to make sure we find out what's comfortable for them. And this would be the form that we would track, keep on file, and then create a spreadsheet so that we can have an idea and have that information ready at the hand in case we need to reach out and talk to them about providing food. So that is the form. It's a MassCare form, and it's online. But I do always have 10 or so in a file in my purse. So next slide, please. So the who, we always, in our area, we do have a lot of different options. We are very lucky, but we always look to support as local as we can to the disaster for several reasons. But we always look at offering diverse options to our guests that are in our shelters, and we want to support those diverse restaurants and suppliers, and of course licensed. And they have all the appropriate permits to be cooking for the community. I don't ask for that right away when I'm just getting a survey. I think that usually comes when we're actually maybe getting an agreement, because I don't want them to feel that kind of pressure. It's just very informal when we're just kind of finding out how they can serve us. I always really like going into the places that are there, brick and mortars, right? They're there serving their communities year round. We've got restaurants, grocery stores, food trucks, caterers, cottage kitchens. Grocery stores can be very helpful if, sometimes they can lose power, and we've been able to get inventory. If their refrigeration goes out, then they call, and they're always happy to get those items over to our shelters. So that they're a really lovely source as well. We also are very interested in commercial kitchens, those vacant commercial kitchens that are in communities. They can be available when outside organizations come in or nonprofits come in to help with the actual preparation and cooking of food. During the Thomas Fire, we had World Central Kitchen come in, and they used our local mission kitchen to prepare all of the food and do all the chopping, all the prep work, and cooking. So it is nice to just have those commercial kitchens too. We do have a community, and they have a commercial kitchen that's vacant most of the time. They rent it out to different areas, and they said, oh my gosh, we'll give you this information so that when we have that immediately ready, when those outside organizations come in, that they can have a beautiful approved kitchen to cook and prepare in. Another thing that has been talked about here, we have county and city members who say, "Oh my gosh, I go to these Rotary Club meetings, and we have 10 restaurants, that are there." And so those are wonderful resources. Your Chamber of Commerce, your county and city members, your Rotary Club members, because again, they're out there in the community. They're usually volunteering themselves and going to parades, and really involved in the community. So they can be great resources, and you can actually partner with them. I had a city emergency officer say, "Oh, I'll go out with you to these restaurants," and you can kind of make a team, and go out together. So that's a little bit about the who. Next slide, please. What we just talked about this survey. It is in the disaster services job tool under mass care and feeding. And when we've got all of that information, it really helps us to know the contact information, capacity, and preferences of our food partners. It's also the form that will assess their capabilities before they would maybe talk to Vicki about a vendor agreement packet. They have an idea on what we're looking for too. We have our guidelines. We like to provide a certain amount of protein, vegetables. So it kind of helps us talk about those early, so that if something happens, they are very comfortable with that vendor packet, that agreement packet. It also, when we capture this information, it is also very helpful if we can create that spreadsheet or that document on OneSource or online, because if it's a big enough event and people come in from out of our area, volunteers and staff, they deploy here, we can also help them and have that information immediately, so they can come in and just immediately get an overview on the restaurants and everybody who's ready to go and has already had a conversation with the American Red Cross. So it is really nice, I think, and helpful to have that for a large event where people would be coming into our community to help and support our local chapter. I think the next slide, please. Okay, so definitely blue sky activity. When we're out and about in our communities, if the Red Cross has meetings and they use those local sources, sandwich places, it's a really nice and easy opportunity to kind of have that conversation with our vendors. There was a county meeting that I attended maybe a month or so ago at a local restaurant, and it was just lovely to be able to have that conversation with her and show her the survey and say, we'd love to reach out to you, if something happens, and support you. We purchase our food. It's one of our largest expenses, and we want to support you as a local business. And we had that survey really back within a couple of hours. So in Blue Sky, we're kind of just, it happens very organically, and we can kind of be out there very friendly and just outreach to our community as well. Whether we get a survey back or not, we've introduced ourselves, and we have let them know that we want to support them. Gray Sky, we do want to keep the information. If people or a restaurant supplies food for one of our shelters or staff shelters, we want to keep that information and have that conversation then. We might not have met them before, but it's all happening. And so now we want to kind of talk to them about a survey and note what they've done so that we can keep that on for future use. And then I think also in recovery, we want to support those businesses in the communities and gather after the disaster. When the Red Cross leaves, I can think of so many occasions when people have continued to meet at restaurants or their local favorite places. So I do feel like even in recovery, we're supporting them and thanking them maybe for providing that meal at our shelter. It was delicious, and give them our guest feedback. They loved it. It just is really a lovely way to say thank you and then support them after the disaster. So, next slide, please. Where do we go? I mentioned a couple of places, but food nerds, foodies, we love talking about our local little favorite haunts, and we want to, we get to know the owners, we get to know the employees. So all of our favorite places to gather, really, we have several places here that are, of course, favorites in the community. And I think that's really up to everybody to get, to reach out to as many places as we can and we have that represent our really our unique, beautiful neighborhoods, right, that we call home, that we're here supporting year round. We really like to, I always think about, new businesses that are maybe just starting up, well-established, those older businesses that have been there forever, nonprofit partners, really all places. I mentioned diversity and really supporting, if there's somebody in town that maybe they've hit hard times, it's just really a lovely opportunity for us to support them and infuse some money into their business and help with them paying their employees. So, which are, may be affected by whatever's happening in our communities. So I really do try to reach out to everybody that we can. And I would love to have a survey on absolutely everybody in our communities. So we've talked about diversity. Sometimes communities will have different preferences for different types of food, and it can be a beautiful source for that too. To kind of really immediately see what the preferences are for the community and the neighbors that are there. I love always the local places to support those restaurants as close to the disasters, close to the shelter as possible, because they might be very much affected as well. So I love to support those local places. And I always talk about, when we all go into a place and we see those Little League pictures on the walls, we know that they sponsored teams, right? Those marching band photos, they are sponsoring booster clubs. They hire high school students. We have a local pizza place. They hire every high school student, that graduates. I think that they've probably hired them all. Those are the restaurants that are really just dear to my heart. They all are. But we know from walking in that they give so much love to their communities. And so I always have a special place in my heart for them. And also, if they're, like I mentioned, maybe they're experiencing hard times. Personally, we get to know them. We start having conversations with them. We learn about their family. And so if they're experiencing challenges, it's just a lovely way to infuse money to help them by purchasing food. And then they feel good, too, about being able to serve their community as well. Even if they are on hard times, I think, when we have hard times, it's always lovely. It's a lovely break for a moment to be able to help somebody else. So I spoke very quickly about the locations that are close to the shelters, right? From our shelter surveys. It's very similar to our shelter surveys. We go out and we look for shelters that will be a good match and be able to give our guests what they need. And it's very similar for the food surveys. We just want to do it from a food perspective. But always I always love to do like a ripple effect and work out from the shelter if I can and support those businesses, or we do here. So that helps with the where. And then why, I probably talked about this because I can talk a lot about this. It's very dear to my heart. We are supporting local businesses first, if we can. And if it makes sense, like if the local businesses are not serving, right, then that is something we want to be mindful of too. And maybe we want to, make a note of that. And then a couple weeks, if we have that shelter that's open for a couple weeks, maybe we can circle back around and support them. Maybe when they get on their feet a bit too, and maybe when they're able to reopen. We are supporting local families and employees. Our employees were dear to our hearts. We were sending them on honeymoons and they became family. And so, their employees may be affected by the disaster. And so we want to keep them employed or make it so the restaurant can give them time off and they're not stressed about it, and give them paid time off or something so that they can go and clean up and do what they need to do. It just puts the business in a much better position to support the people that are there every day. I've talked about, the financial support. It creates such a strong safety net, even during recovery, supports Main Street recovery again. Those empty storefronts, if businesses go out of business, that can be really difficult for people to see, especially if they're seeing maybe empty lots or empty storefronts with the neighbors and people that they love in their community. That can be difficult too. So it really is just such a nice way for us to infuse support and those dollars to help keep those businesses going. Again, it creates togetherness and strength in communities, I think before, during, and after. And it also gives an opportunity to our partners to reduce any waste or spoilage, because if they have for their inventory, if they have, their refrigerators stocked, planning on serving dinners for a week, and then something happens, people may not be going to their restaurant, and we don't, that food may spoil. So I have had instances where, restaurants, a restaurant, or again, like Target, something may call and say, we don't want this food to go bad. And so we can say, great, let's talk about, dinner here at the shelter instead of maybe your restaurant, where maybe people don't have the opportunity to go out to dinner as much. And again, it also helps everybody when when we go to each other's communities, that we can see at a glance, maybe have just, a few, probably not everything, but we have we can immediately see, resources that will work for us, and immediately kind of get in contact and get a game plan, for a few days of meals ahead of time. I always think when we're serving lunch, we're probably thinking about dinner 3 days from now. So it really helps people when we deploy to other areas that we can see, everybody who is ready to go, all those restaurants and partners that we've talked with. And then when we call them, they're not going to say, oh, what? They're familiar, they want to help. And I have received texts from people saying, what can I do? So the introduction's already been done, and it really is a lovely thing. So yeah. So I think next slide. If I have more, I think I do. Yes, I have one. And this is a Red Cross standard, isn't it? So the final food for thought, we are always flexible, and we realize that our partners are as well. So when I have a survey, or when I may be calling out, I'm sure we've all been in this, where maybe a place does not deliver. Typically, they might say online they don't deliver, but they will when there's a shelter or when their community is in need. So even though I see on a survey that maybe they can't do vegetarian, or they don't deliver, or they won't do breakfast, sometimes, it's worth it to reach out and touch base with them. How are you doing? But also realize that maybe they'll deliver. I have had people go outside of their delivery location. They'll say, oh, I'll only go out, 10 miles, but they'll go further. So I do keep them flexible. The surveys are just kind of an overview. And I also let them know that as well. Like if something happens, we will still try, reach out to you. And then I think I've touched everything. Yeah, I think I've touched on all of this. I do have one thing too I want to share. So during the mountain fire, November of 2024, we had a shelter, and it eventually transitioned into the county was supporting at a hotel for 2 weeks. In the Red Cross, we were doing food. So we were delivering snacks and meals for 2 weeks. And it was right before Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving was, of course, on the Thursday, and they were all transitioning out of their hotel on that Sunday prior. But we all had looked up, Thanksgiving dinners. We had it plated. We had, if they got a place with, an oven, raw turkeys. If they didn't, cook turkeys. We had all options on the table. And I have to say, they all have places to go on a Sunday, but they reached out before Thanksgiving, right before Thanksgiving, and they said, Christine, you please come and join us on Thanksgiving. They were going to one of the restaurants that was supporting us during the fire and during their hotel stay, and they were going back. They said, we want to go back here. They are going to do a special dinner for us for Thanksgiving, and we want you to join us. And I did go. I said I would love to, and I wound up going. And what they told me was they said it was so empowering for them to invite us to go, because we had been supporting them. And so just to have that moment with them in a restaurant that they organized, it was it was so beautiful on Thanksgiving. I'll never forget it. And I have, they have reached out on occasion. They've met at Christmas or, another holiday, and they meet at the restaurants that supported them. And so when they walk in and we're there, they're talking to the manager like their family. So it really is just a beautiful, it was just so beautiful. And I felt so thankful to be with them on Thanksgiving that day, and that they organized it and they were supporting one of the restaurants. So I'll never forget it. I'm still in touch with those clients. They're all on different roads of their, forward, but they all get together and they're all still talking about this person's doing this and this group is doing this, and they're all meeting at those restaurants 2 years later. So very a special moment for me. So yeah, so I think that the restaurants, again, it's just another example of how special they are in our communities, all those food providers. Again, food is my love language, so I think it is really special when people provide a beautiful meal. But anyway, so that these are the things that we're doing in Blue Sky. And then as we transition, then, you know, when we go to Gray Sky, now I'll introduce you back to Vicki, hand it back to you, Vicki, so that you can talk about what happens when something happens. How do we go back to those partners, and what do we do?
Great, thank you. And we should have time at the end for Q&A. So let's talk a bit about Gray Sky, and then we can open it to questions from everybody. So thank you so much for that info, Christine. These Blue Sky foundations, like I said, I really think they're so important. And that's one of the things you do if you're going to be activating an agreement with a vendor. I mean, you're hoping that these conversations and these relationships have been established. So even if you're coming in, you're deploying from out of the area, you want to take advantage of that work that has been done. So we'll talk a bit about doing that. So the document that Christine has been talking about, of course, is the Food Vendor Capability Survey. It says, all of this is on OneSource, of course, but it's like a one page. And again, it's nothing binding. It's not an official agreement. It's really just getting a sense of what their capabilities are. What types of meals, how much turnaround time they need, how much notification time, things like that, and really building those relationships. But when you are then in a disaster situation, when you're, working on a disaster relief operation, when you need to actually, contact that vendor, make an agreement, and start using them for feeding for our communities, that's when you transition to filling out what's called a disaster feeding supplier agreement. So we're going to go through that kind of, not in detail. This is going to be mostly done by the headquarters feeding manager. So for the vast majority of you, you definitely don't memorize this. Don't worry about it until you are in that position and need to do it. But I know there's always a lot of questions about how we do this. How do we activate a vendor? How do you create a purchase order? What does that mean? And so I just want to take some of the mystery, a little of the mystery around this kind of process of going from a vendor, agreement vendor survey in Blue Sky to actually making an agreement with them, an official agreement, and doing all the paperwork and things like that have to happen behind the scenes so that we can pay them. And like Christine was saying, that this is a really important part of our community's recovery. It's the community is not just, the individuals who are affected, but also the businesses, including the feeding businesses. So, that we can help support and help the community itself get back on their feet through these agreements. These are so important. So, like I said, this is typically done by the headquarters feeding manager, or whatever they are going to be called. I always forget the new terminology that they're talking about, but basically the person who is in charge of feeding, who's working at the headquarters. And so they're going to be making these agreements with vendors. I don't honestly do this a huge amount, because usually when I deploy in feeding, and managing feeding, I tend to come into the middle or end. But I have done this a few times, including last year when I deployed to the LA fires and feeding for almost 5 weeks. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with the one vendor that we ended up setting up halfway through that. But the important paperwork is this packet called the Disaster Feeding Supplier Agreement. So we'll talk about that in a minute. It includes several things here. But before we get into that, before you reach out to a vendor, you realize you need to make arrangements for feeding for our shelters, or if we're going to do, mobile feeding in the community with herbs. First thing you want to do is really try to get that information, talk to the local feeding or mass care team, get those vendor capability surveys, find out what they've been doing, what vendors do they have agreements with, what vendors have they used in past disasters, right? And also, if you're talking to locals, if you're deploying from out of the area and you're coming into an area, talk to the people who live in that area and see where do they like to eat? Where do they get food? Where, the locals always know the best food options, right? So hopefully you have the basis of the work that Christine, for example, is doing, doing these capability surveys that you have to start with, so you know who to go to. But even if you have that, ask around, get ideas. There is actually a document on OneSource. We're not going to go into it, but just so you know, it's called Using Regional Plans on Disaster Relief Operations. And it'll talk a little bit about how to utilize those resources, how to get started with that. And it's also, before you reach out to a vendor, so you have that information, you have a list of possible vendors, think about what do you need, right? Of course, the general gather info, right? What is the need? What is the request that you're going to give to that particular vendor? What resources do you have available? You need to know how many sites we're feeding at, how many meals we think that's going to be per day, which meals. Are you feeding at shelters, at headquarters? Are you doing non-congregate sheltering feeding, mobile feeding? Kind of get a sense of what are you going to ask from this particular vendor, right? And what is your available, how many, do you have staff? Do you have IRVs? Any other type of vehicles? What, can we deliver? What is our limitations? And then of course, always, what kinds of specialty meals, so you can make sure that you can either, from that vendor, if they are able to supply that, or if you're going to have to make different arrangements for example, kosher meals or halal meals. But get a sense of kind of what is the thing that you're going to request from the vendor before you set up a meeting with them and go into it. So a couple of other OneSource resources. Most of these I'm not going to go into detail about, but just so you know that they're there. So we already talked about the disaster feeding supplier agreement packet, which we'll look at in more detail in a minute. This is the one we were just talking about, the Using Regional Plans on Disaster Relief Operations. The other two documents that I want to look at quickly are just good resources for if you ever find yourself having to set up these agreements with a feeding vendor or feeding partner. So there's one called Activating Feeding Partners and Vendors. This is both previously used vendors, people who are already kind of in the system that in previous disasters, they've actually made agreements with them. We still have the agreement on file, and how do you reactivate those? And then there's also a document called Placing and Managing Orders with Feeding Vendors. So they talk about what you need to do, and this gets into the purchase order aspect a bit more. So it has a very clear, like, how do you set up a purchase order? Where do you send it? That kind of information. So like for this Activating Feeding Partners and Vendors document on OneSource, just to clarify, let me go back real quick. These are in what's called the Feeding Manager Task Bundle on OneSource. So these are things that are specifically done by the feeding manager. This is not an everyday feeding worker, but just again, to give you a kind of a sense of what they're doing behind the scenes to set up these agreements with vendors. So again, they kind of have information about vendors that are regularly used in that area, making sure that we have all of the information, that it's all up to date. In theory, they already have a disaster feeding supplier agreement packet on record, but you want to review and verify that the information is still correct. That we also have their W-9 form, which we'll talk about in a minute. And just make sure that they have everything so that we can pay them after they start providing food and providing invoices to us. And they also talk through about how you do this for new vendors. Right? So completing the disaster feeding supplier agreement packet with them, submitting that with the W-9, which is an IRS form, has their taxpayer identification number and things like that, and also health certificates. And all of this is clarified and discussed in that disaster feeding supplier agreement packet. And then if necessary, submitting the purchase order, the PO. So that placing and managing orders with feeding vendors really goes into figuring out how are we going to pay the vendor, and it really depends on how much we think we're going to spend with them. So if we think the overall cost with that vendor is going to be under $1,000, and as long as the meals are approved and they're not being included in a purchase order, we're not doing any other agreement with that vendor. It says pay with a P card, or if you are unable to access a P card, you can use an MCPC, a mass care procurement card, which is a version of a mission card that is getting the word activated with a certain amount of money. I think it's usually 500 for kind of forget like emergency purchases at a shelter, for example. The cost is expected to be between $1,000 and $25,000. That's when they want you to use the feeding supplier meal order form, which we'll talk about in a minute, and make sure that we all save all information, not just this, but everything on a DRO team site. This is one of the times when I come in at the middle or end. I spend a lot of time reconstructing information and trying to find information that hasn't been saved in one central location. So please, if at all possible, make sure that you save everything everywhere that you think it might be needed. And again, you would pay with a P card for this. You don't need a purchase order if it is going to be, we think it's going to be under $25,000. And again, if you can't access a P card for some reason, use an MCPC, a Mass Care Procurement Card. But if you think that the total cost with a vendor is going to be more than $25,000, and we'll talk about how you figure out that amount, then you do need to set up a purchase order. And bear in mind that it can't be retroactive. So it takes not a long time, but usually a couple of days to set up a purchase order. But if they start providing meals before that is set up, we need to pay those. Any meals that happen before the purchase order is actually set up, we will have to pay separately with a P card, for example. So just keep that in mind, that it takes time not a lot of time, but a little bit of time to set it up, which doesn't mean that they can't, if we need them to start immediately, that's fine. We will just have to pay those separately on a separate invoice with a P card. See, yeah, and they also talk about placing the meal order. Again, they're filling out this feeding supplier meal order form, submitting it to the vendor, and keeping track of that. And also everything that we order must be recorded. We need to order the number, a number of meals per vendor every day, because we have to reconcile that at the end when we start getting the invoices from the vendors. Again, one of the things that I do a lot of is reconciling the vendor's invoice for how much they sent, how many meals they say that we requested, with our records of how many we actually requested and how many we received. So make sure that you are recording all that information and saving it somewhere where after you finish your 2-week deployment, somebody else has access to that information as well. And again, don't worry about this if you're not a manager. This is just to talk a little bit about, because I always get a lot of questions about how do you do this and how do you fill out the 6409 to request a purchase order, which is the main way that you request or open a purchase order. I guess you can also now do it in WebEOC. I have not done that yet, and it's not always available. It depends on the DR. So if your supervisor tells you to do that, and hopefully they tell you how. But the traditional way is to fill out the logistics form 6409, the resource record. Is that resource record? Anyway, whatever it's called. I see a thumbs up. I hope that's correct. And so the formula the information that they want in that, and so this is the actual one that I filled out with this group. It's called Hope the Mission. It's a local nonprofit in the LA area that they provide food to various organizations. So we made an agreement with them to feed for the month of March. As you can see, the date needed 3/1 to 3/31. We estimated our request at that time was 40 meals for 40 people twice daily for 31 days, which when you do mathematically equals 2,480 meals. And then I put in the description. So 80 meals per day times 31 days times $10 a meal is $24,800 that we think that we're going to pay, which is close enough to $25,000 that we decided we needed a PO. And I believe they actually ended up feeding for longer than that. So they probably did. And by the way, you can always increase the amount of a PO and you don't have to use the entire amount. That's just an amount that they set up, but it can be increased pretty easily. And again, if you don't use it all, there's no problem at all. So it's better to have a PO in place. If you think it's possible that you're going to get to that $25,000 or pretty close to it, there's no negative to setting it up in that case. And so you can see in the special instructions I wrote, so like I said, this is the actual one. I crossed out information. I don't care if my info's up there, but I'm not going to share anybody else's. And you can see, by the way, that the date that I actually submitted this was 3/3, even though the requested they started feeding us on 3/1, because I was waiting for them to send back the that agreement packet and finish filling it out. So I wasn't able to submit the PO request until the 3rd. I think it was created either that day or the next day, I forget. But so for the first 3 or 4 days, we had them bill us separately and paid that by P card. But yeah, so it just sometimes it takes a day or two to get that. So you just know that it's not retroactive, but we will pay them one way or another. We will definitely pay for the meals that they're providing. So I was saying vendor will be providing meals. This is for our non-congregate shelter clients at the time in certain hotels. March 1st through March 31st, estimate of up to 80 meals per day. At $10 per meal for 31 days equals. So this is the calculation that they want. So this formula is the price per meal times the expected number of meals per day and the expected number of days. And that's the amount that you request for the purchase order. So we requested a purchase order in the amount of 24,800. I think they just set it up for 25,000 because it was so close. And also I want to point that, and something to keep in mind, the amount, that overall amount, that 24,800 or 25,000, or I will tell you, I've seen POs for up to over $1 million, but that the amount determines who can approve that. Because all the different positions, leadership positions on a DR have different limits. They have approval limits for certain amounts. So in this case, for example, you can see that we had to go to the job director because he was the only one who had an approval amount of $25,000. Nobody else could approve a purchase order, a single kind of purchase for 25,000, even though we weren't actually paying 25,000, but we were setting kind of the money aside to pay up to that amount through the purchase order. So, and then part of this, of course, you're going to meet with the disaster feeding supplier and fill out this packet, which again, we'll look at in just a second. I think that's the next thing. And then you'll submit, after you have the packet back from them, you would submit that with this 6409 requesting these and their W-9, the IRS form, and also their health certificates. Submit it to masscare@redcross.org and also to, of course, whoever is going to be approving that 6409, especially if it's a digital approval. And I'd say CC also, of course, your supervisor, so probably be MassCare chief or whoever your supervisor is, and logistics, because they need to know this is happening as well. And they have things, logistics always needs our 6409s. So this, I want to actually jump out and go look at the actual feeding supplier agreement rather than my kind of description of it on a PowerPoint. So let me pull this over here first. Okay. Where did it go? Yes, there we go. Okay, sorry. Technically, can everyone see the feeding supplier agreement?
We can see your screen, but not your agreement. We can see that
Hmm.
you're currently on your OneDrive.
Oh, interesting. Okay, let me pull over here. So I have two screens, so it shared the one that I didn't think it was going to share. Interesting. Thank you. Glad I checked. Okay, can you see the disaster feeding supplier agreement?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go through this pretty quickly. Like I said, this is just sort of FYI for most of you, but also I'm hoping I mean, I love being a feeding manager, so I hope this inspires some of you to move up and start being willing to do these kind of things at headquarters, because we need people to. So you can see this is the feeding supplier agreement. So it includes these two documents that we need to fill out. These are this is writable PDF, so you can just type them in. And so I would highly recommend having a meeting with the vendor once you find a vendor, hopefully by working with the feeding the surveys. You can find somebody that you want to reach out to and see if they're available to be activated and fill out an agreement. It also includes a couple of different sample guides to use as reference and discuss with the vendor. and then tells them that they need to attach their W-9 and the proof of their state health department certifications and licenses. But it's easiest if you go through this with them on a call, like on a video call, on a Teams call. This is going to be filled out by the vendor, but I would say ahead of time, fill out your Red Cross representative contact information. Just anything that you can fill out, either ahead of time or on the call, will speed the whole process along. So you can put your info here before you actually meet with them. And it goes through, there's several different sections. It's a 6-page, the kind of request for quotation part is 6 pages. So a lot of this is similar to what we see on the this vendor capability survey that Christine was talking about. You can see the vendor capability survey doesn't have lengthy information about what our feeding meal content standards. That is available in the feeding activity standards. You can see here. It's also available, like you can see here, on the in that agreement. So it lists out, so we can discuss with them, first, what is the cost that they're going to charge us for each meal, right, as relevant. And then what are we expecting for that cost, right? These are kind of our regular, breakfast consisting of this, if we're requesting breakfast from them, lunch and dinner, 8-ounce entree by volume, 6 ounces vegetables, 6 ounces fruit, water, banquet pack, clamshell or plate, anything around that. So it's important to make sure that they are clear on what our requirements are for those meals. Like what are we expecting to get? We talk about the service requirement as well, kind of what we will provide versus what they will provide. Let's see. And then go down to the capabilities. So what's the minimum number of meals that they will accept as an order? Like if they can only do it, if we can only request, more than at least 15 meals a day, we need to know. So maximum number also, so minimum and maximum, and how many times. Just kind of going through all of this, right, with them. And again, of course, this important dietary preferences. What can they accommodate? You'll notice that some of these kosher, halal, diabetic, renal, gluten-free, they have these asterisks, which means they have to provide specific proof of certification that they can provide those types of meals explicitly. So so they will let you know, this is something that they choose and say, yes, we can do vegetarian and vegan, but nothing else or whatever. But this, we need to know this information. It's helpful again to know ahead of time what we think we're going to need. What are the needs of the dietary needs of the community that we're feeding. But we may have to go to other vendors in order to, for example, if a lot of people will not be able to do the kosher or halal, certified meals. So we need to know if they can or cannot provide those. And again, any equipment that they can provide, and if there's any additional charge for those. Just basically walking through this with the vendor is important. And then, of course, how do we pay them? So this is our traditional regular method. Our payment terms are that this 2% 15, net 45, you'll see a lot. What it means is that, I think it says down here, basically, if we pay within 15 days, then we get a 2% discount on the total. And otherwise, if not, basically the entire amount is due within 45 days of receiving the invoice. So they should know what this means, but just FYI, and it is spelled out somewhere on here. All purchase, I think it's in the PO discussion, actually, it spells that out, what that means. And it lets them know that we're going to be doing a purchase order if we think it's going to be over that $25,000. And if not, it'll be credit card or direct invoice. It lets them know this is very important. Tell them and point out where to send the invoice and all the supporting documents. They should also CC you or your supervisor. Somebody should also have a direct link to that or have that information being sent to them directly, so we can keep an eye on it as we're going. And then again, invoices and all that to the DCS invoices and how often they want to invoice us, weekly, biweekly, monthly. This is up to the vendor to decide. They also need to decide how they're going to receive the money. Do they want a check to be cut for them for especially if it's over 25,000, or the ACH, automated clearinghouse? It's a different way of us. They have to request this enrollment form, but it's another way, basically how they want to get paid, physically get the money. And then if they want to also add any other pertinent information, I've never seen anybody add this, but I'm sure people do add other info to when they return the packet to you. So these 6 pages are that you want to walk through them carefully, because we want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that they are making decisions about when they're going to get paid. The page 7 is the other thing that we need to fill out, and this you can fill out and should fill out ahead of time. So this is from Red Cross. So this is, the date, our return address and all that stuff, dear, whatever the contact's name is. So fill this out as the Red Cross representative, and you can do the electronic signature and everything beforehand, because you don't want this to be something that's holding up anything. So these first 7 pages, this is what we need back from the vendor in order to set up the agreement, to finish setting up the agreement, get it all set up with logistics, and get a purchase order set up if necessary. It's really this first page is what they're going to have to fill out after the fact. So make sure you walk through it with them, fill out as much as you can, then send it to them to finish filling out. And I'm just going to show quickly, the last 2 documents are these kind of reference information. And so this goes more into information, especially for the vendor, but also it's good for you to read. It talks more about the purchase order. Here's their standard payment terms, the 2%, 15, net 45. Explains that we will take a 2% discount on the invoice amount if we can pay it within 15 days, but otherwise we'll pay the total within 45 days of the date of the invoice, or the date it was received, I should say. So this is something good to walk through, give it to the vendor. They can read this also, again, on their own afterwards. And we also give them a sample feeding supplier meal order form, so they can see how we're going to request, the different meals, special and regular meals, lunches and dinners, etc., and the contact information for that. So this, let's see, how do I go back to the PowerPoint? That is my question. Should I stop sharing? Can't say it.
So let me go ahead and reshare my screen.
Okay. All right, let me jump. So hopefully that wasn't too much whirlwind of info that you don't really necessarily need to know, but just want to, again, remove some of the mystery around what do we do? And what really the most important thing is to know where to find the information. You don't have to memorize this, but if you find yourself in a position where you need to set up an agreement, I think it's the page. Yeah, here we go. Where do you, how do you remember how to do that? And every time, because it's usually about a year in between every time I do this, so I always have to kind of relearn like, okay, what do I do now and who do I send it to? But there are resources for that. So again, this is after the meeting. You're going to send that in progress packet, which you've been filling out with them, and have them fill out whatever hasn't already been filled out, and make sure they return it with their Form W-9, which is the request for taxpayer identification number and certification. They should know what that is as a business. And then, of course, the proof of applicable state health department certifications and licenses. And when you get that back, if necessary, again, if you think it's going to be $25,000 or more, you would set up the PO like we talked about. And then just to reiterate this point, make sure that you keep track of both for every day, how many meals you're requesting from the vendor, for every vendor, and how many meals we're actually receiving. Because again, these are the things that this is the info we need as we're starting to wrap up, especially the DR, in order to reconcile those invoices and actually pay the vendor. I think that is it. I wanted to point out real quick. That's why I added the pictures of our feeding team. This is LA last year, and you can see there's Julia Bishop, And we had a community group, a business, a local business that was affected. And they actually provided the lunch here you can see for headquarters one day, and came in and did a tour. It was really fun. And it's our feeding team in the chaos of that headquarters room. But I wanted to share this primarily because you can see here on the left, bottom left, this is the first meal that we received from that group, Hope the Mission, on March 1st. So somebody sent me pictures so we could see what they were serving. It was, you can see a soup and a salad. And then the dinner for that day on the right here, I think there was something else as well, but I don't remember what it was. They didn't send me a picture of it, but you can see there's a pasta, there's a protein and vegetable, and I don't remember what the other thing was, maybe a fruit on the side. But we got great reviews from this vendor. But yeah, somebody sent me these to make sure that we knew that they were meeting those feeding requirements. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. And so yeah, any questions? We're happy to talk more.
Thank you. Mary, do you want to say anything before we go to the questions? We only have one question and we have 5 minutes left.
Yes, I would like to say one thing real briefly. I want to give a plug for next week, our final presentation in the series. And we are going to demystify field kitchens. Those of you who want to deploy to Florida and South Carolina and Georgia and all of those places down there that do field kitchens, please, please, please sign in. There's going to be a heavy focus, I'll tell you, on supervisors and manager duties, but we invite everyone, especially those who want to possibly be a supervisor. The kitchen sites are fun. They're exciting. They're busy. You're not sitting behind a table at HQ. So if you have interest in employing in that area, please, please, please join us for our last and final presentation in the series. Thanks, Iwe.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Vicki and Christine, for presenting. We have the question is, who are the people better placed to estimate number of meals and number of days? Is it the shelter manager, the program manager, our partners? Who can tell us how many days we're feeding?
That is a great question. This actually is probably a conversation with MassCare, with can't think of the word, AD of operations. I mean, they the kind of headquarters, the leadership of the DR have to do all of these estimations for numbers of meals they think we're going to be serving, for how long and things like that. And so I would say start with that information from your supervisor, and see what their understanding it is. But it's also talking to GovOps, to our partners, who are kind of going out in the field and seeing, where the devastation is, talking to if we've been doing feeding in an area and we're switching vendors, talking to kind of what people are seeing. But there is kind of official estimations done of how many meals we're going to be serving and for how long in particular. I'd say that's the main part that you're going to get from your supervisor is how long does the DR plan to be feeding in various places? How long do they plan on having shelters open? How long do they think they plan on doing, mobile feeding, things like that? Not sure if that answered the question, but.
Thank you so much. I am not seeing any hands and I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A. I'm going to give a minute or so just to see if we have anything popping up. And Vicki and Christine, do you have any tips that you want to leave? One tip to leave with the audience while we wait for any more questions?
I'd say jump in. Like feeding teams are fun. Whatever your role is, they tend to be, especially if we're doing any kind of mobile feeding or multiple sites, they tend to be kind of fun groups of people. And our feeding folks really love to go out into the communities. They love to be IRF drivers. They love to be able to go out, and it's one of the ways that you can really interact directly with the clients who are affected. And you get a very strong sense of, my hands have helped people today. So I know it's something that people feel very strongly about and love to do. And it's always a fun team. You get very much like a strong team sense of the folks that you're working with and going out into the field with. And
Thank
there's
you
also
so
stuff for everybody. I
much.
mean, if you like paperwork, if you like driving an ERV, if you like, feeding at a shelter or feeding out of the side of the earth. I mean, there's something for everybody in feeding, whatever your love is. Sorry, Yue, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your tips and thank you for your compassion. With that, we'll go ahead and close, and we'll see you next week with the same link. A gentle reminder to update your availability on Volunteer Connection. We have multiple events going on with the Pacific Islands region, so remember to update your availability. Thank you all. Have a great night.